I kind of see myself jumping from endeavor to endeavor to endeavor to endeavor as long as I live, because I tend to get really passionate about something new all the time and want to learn everything about it and try it and focus on it for a while. And then, once I've learned it and had some experience with it, I'm like, okay, what's next? What can I learn about next? I feel like specialization is overrated, and putting 40, maybe not 40 years, but a lifetime into one area of work is kind of selling yourself short. If we live in this big world full of all these fascinating people and things and ideas and things that you can do with your time, I would just love to try as much of it as possible.
This is episode 39 of the Ownstream Podcast, featuring Hannah Miller.
Welcome to the Ownstream Podcast. I'm Teresa Scova.
And I'm Stephen Shelley.
And we just hung up with Hannah Miller, Edventure Girl, Edventure Girl, who was just, what a wonderful, genuine, inspiring person, a 21-year-old.
Yeah,
really got so much good energy and wisdom from this conversation from somebody who's lived her life very different from the mainstream. We first learned of Hannah. Hannah is a world-schooled child, now not child anymore, and her experience being world-schooled with her family from age 11 to her decision to go to university in Canada. And we learned of Hannah from an article she wrote about world schooling, which we'll link in the show notes, about how world schooling ruined her life, which is a sort of a tongue-in-cheek in the sense of how it transformed her life.
And I think I must have found that on Twitter. I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm racking my brain here trying to figure out how we learned of her.
She mentions that it went viral in the interviews.
It did go viral, and so I think I saw someone share it, and I was immediately struck by it because we have she's a year and a half at this point, our daughter, but we're of course thinking about how we want to foster her learning, her curiosity, and we're very drawn to alternative education models like world schooling, unschooling, and homeschooling. And the thing that you take away from, if you listen to this episode, the Ben Hewitt episode, and the Sarah Warden episode, is that there's no cookie cutter approach, and that's by design. That's actually good, and it would be flawed, I think, if there was suddenly a standard way of doing alternative education, because really I think what those models are about fostering a natural curiosity which is different in every child. And so Hannah's version of this is very different than Ben Hewitt's kids or Sarah Warden's kids. I'm referring to podcast episodes in our series that you can look at. But what struck me about talking to her, beyond her sense of humor, her warmth, her generosity, and her intellect, which is very mature for someone 21, but is how varied her interests are. Like she loves to draw, she loves to write, she loves to play the fiddle, and she loves to travel. There's all of these different facets to her that it's clear that she has not been schooled in a standardized way. Because when I was 21, I was thinking about, what's my career going to be? What am I going to do? And I was all in with, I think at the age of 21, let me see if I can remember. I was all in with learning how to be an actor, and everything else was secondary. That was the only thing that mattered. And our culture values that a lot. Okay, focus on one thing and become great at it. Whereas I think if you kind of get that out of the way, what we've seen is kids who are just into all different things, and they're not so concerned about being successful at it. They just like doing it. And that's what comes through on this episode, is that she's just naturally interested in all manner of things, which is really cool.
Yeah, Stephen describes that his viewpoint at that stage of his life at one point in this interview is he was looking at a straight line ahead of him, and Hannah's is exactly not that.
Totally
it is
not that.
All over the canvas, can pop up anywhere at any time, unlimited potential, unlimited excitement. She even says I can't imagine spending my lifetime doing one thing. Why would one choose to do that? It's just not what she thinks about, because she's had a lifetime already at her young age of exploration, and that's what she wants going forward.
Yeah, and she tells some incredible stories, being in some kind of Bedouin or Berber kind of camel festival in Tunisia, like really, really cool stuff. Just really, really special to grow up in this way, traveling and being on the road and seeing things directly instead of just out of books. And there's nothing wrong with books, but the experience of the world and of cultures and mostly of other people is what I was connecting a lot with, and how that shapes a person so differently than if you're reading about history in a book and reading about other cultures in a book and reading about other people, or just seeing it on TV, being in the middle of a wildly different culture, say like Northern Africa, to what she grew up with prior to that in New Hampshire.
Yeah, she has an open-mindedness and a connectedness to, issues affecting humanity, to her questions about spirituality. Like there's a sense of connection she has to people and to issues that is different than having just read them out of books, I think.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
Stephen mentioned that we're personally interested in this topic because of Sophia, and because we also formed a rather nomadic lifestyle ourselves. And, I think we often get the comment of, oh, do it now because, once she's 5 or once she has to go to school, it's all going to change. There's this linear notion that we have about like what education looks like that I think we are definitely encountering this ourselves. We also wanted to add this particular interview to the series we've done on alternative forms of education, because we've received a lot of questions around, what's that actually like for a child to go through that? Is it isolating? Does it, there's this sense that you will not have a social experience if you don't go to school. That's one thing we hear over and over again. And I think we really wanted to talk to somebody who'd gone through that, who that's one of the myths I would say that she dispels in that blog post that we talked about, that actually she has friends around the world, she has connections around the world, and she has never felt alone. And
she's very easily able to integrate into wherever she is. Like, for example, this interview takes place, we're going to release this on Thanksgiving 2017. It's just a week or so before that when we're talking to her. She's doing a study abroad program in the Netherlands while being a fully enrolled student at Queen's College in Canada. So, and she's very attached to others. She has friends, and she has friends all around the world, but her ability to kind of integrate and weave into a culture is pretty nimble because she's been doing it for so long. So in fact, I think what shines through in this conversation is the opposite to what I think the typical view on socializing with people is that she's actually very, very able to connect with people and confident about that. Something that I struggled with for many years as a young adult. So anyway, this is a very rich conversation. Before we kind of turn it over to the interview, I do want to mention a couple of things. We are back kind of at least temporarily off the road, and I think the horizon for us doesn't seem to indicate jumping back in the van and kind of going off the grid for an extended period of time. We're looking at a number of other very interesting adventures, more on that later. But that being said, we are kind of opening up our coaching work some. We have a few slots, if you will, available for some people to work with us. We're excited to do that. We have a number of interested folks in that already, which is a lot of fun. Teresa, who is a phenomenal writer, updated our website recently. I say that like truly, honestly, and our coaching offer has been clarified. I think there's a lot of more detail there, that if working with us is interesting to you, you'll be very clear on what we're offering and what we're intending to promote, what we want, what kind of experience we want you to have. And you can learn more about that at ownstream.co/coaching. But mainly, if you can, look at if you're a podcast listener curious about what that experience is like, it's really about kind of finding your own unique path, which starts with identifying what you're really here for, what's your calling, what are you excited about? And then from there, giving that the proper space to flourish and create, and in many cases recreate a life anew from that position. It can be dramatic, it can be subtle, but it's very exciting, very rewarding, and for us as coaches, it's magical, no doubt about it. So check that out, ownstream.co/coaching. It's hard for me to say backslash coaching. And also, we're very much asking for a favor. We are actively recruiting reviews for our podcast. We love this podcast. It's really starting to take off. A lot of excitement about it. We get a lot of messages about it. People are really becoming fans of the podcast, which is super cool. So if that identifies you, even to some degree, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star review on iTunes. And we're asking for that because it helps us build our profile. It's not vanity or ego, but it's really about service. Like, we really want more people to be exposed to this content. We want more people to be reached. We want to expand this profile, giving people like Hannah Miller, Ben Hewitt, Anurag Gupta, just looking at our last few episodes, a broader platform to share the message that they have worked, what their life is really about. We want those messages to get out there more fully. So if you could do that for us, it'll take you a couple of minutes, and you'll do us a huge favor. Just go to iTunes, search for the Ownstream Podcast, find the ratings and reviews section. Click that 5th star. That's what we're asking for, please. And then in the comment section, share a little bit about kind of how we've inspired you or helped you or added to your life in some way. If that resonates, we'd love for you to do that. It would be a huge service to us. Thank you. So, okay, that's enough from us. We'll be back afterwards for a quick wrap up. Until then, enjoy our conversation with Hannah Miller.
Hannah, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you. And we've covered the topics of world schooling and unschooling on the podcast before, but really with parents who are leading their families through that experience. And I know that your experience has been world schooling, not unschooling, which is something we'll talk about. But welcome. So let's talk. Maybe we could start with how this all started for you, this world schooling experience. So I think from reading some of your writings, you were 11 when your dad quit his job and sold your house in New Hampshire, and your family took off for what was intended at that time to be a 1-year travel adventure. Tell us a little bit about what life was like at that time. So before that happened, what was going on in your life, in your family's life? Was it fairly conventional, or were there kind of whiffs of non-conventionality at that time too?
Yeah, okay. Well, so at the age of 11 and before that, I was living in New Hampshire with my 3 younger brothers and my parents, and we kind of lived in the back 40, surrounded by acres of forest and stuff. We were in the middle of nowhere. So I spent most of my time building forts and hunting wild mushrooms and, beating the boys at everything. So I would say it wasn't exactly 100% conventional, but it was definitely a lot more on the normal side of things for sure. And we were homeschooled at that point, so we were studying at home. My mom was a teacher before she had us, so she kind of didn't really want to put us into the system that she had been working in. So she sort of took over our schooling on her own at that point.
And did she maintain her quote unquote job at that point, or was she full-time mom, full-time raising?
Full-time mom.
Yeah,
full-time mom. She also wrote a bunch of homeschool curriculum type things, and she had work outside of us. I can't imagine my mom ever not having more than one project. She's kind of a superhero in terms of how much she can get done. So.
And somewhere on your site, you refer to your dad as your quote favorite genius. Is that right? Tell us about him too.
Yeah, he's kind of a genius. He's a really techie guy. He's currently building a coffee roaster that you can program from your phone, and I'm not entirely sure. It's a little complicated, but the past year has just been all different kinds of failures and retrying things and roasting coffee beans out of a popcorn maker. And so he's always up to something.
That sounds
awesome.
Cool. I'm a bit of a coffee geek. Teresa laughs at me basically every morning as I'm measuring our grounds and a little obsessive about it. So I'm into that. Tell your daddy's probably got a client in me if he comes up with that app.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Starbucks is a big no-no in our family.
Oh.
You have to hide it. You don't post pictures. You don't say anything.
Hush, hush. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you guys, your dad quit his job. You guys sold the house, and then you took off. What was that like? I mean, you're 11 years old. I'm trying to remember when I was 11 years old. A few years ago. And I had moved already then significantly from one city to another, and it was a thing. I remember that. Like I remember, oh my gosh, I'm leaving this place I'm comfortable with. I'm leaving my friends, quote unquote. I had some good friends. I was in the 4th grade. So in your case, what was that like? What was that experience like? Did you kind of jump in with both feet, or was there some reluctance?
I would say a little bit of both. I mean, we also had moved a lot as kids, even just up to that point. We spent a good 4 years or 5 years maybe in New Hampshire, so I was really familiar with that place. But before that, like I was born in Indiana, and then we lived in Chicago, and then we lived in Nashua, New Hampshire. So we moved multiple times. So I guess I was used to the idea of moving. I wasn't used to the idea of, we're not moving to a new location. We're moving continually. Like there's no one day where we move and then we're there, right? So I was a little nervous, but at the same time, I was this really nerdy, weird little 11-year-old. I read like all the books on travel. I loved to read. So I think at the time, what was it? I think it was Around the World in 80 Days was my favorite book. So I was also at the same time thrilled. Like I couldn't wait to go like travel the world and do all these crazy things. I had expectations that I think, okay, well, so the first place that we showed up, right, was London. We flew there to start the entire trip. And I got out expecting, Jules Verne. I was like, where are the men in top hats? Where are the what's happening? But yeah, I'd say I was pretty excited. I wasn't too worried about leaving my friends behind. It was like a slight concern, but I wasn't that worried about it.
And tell us more about like how this idea came about. Like what, how did your family decide to do that? Like what inspired that? What changed?
Yeah. Okay. Well, my mom traveled a lot as a kid, before it was kind of the trendy thing to do. Her dad pulled her out of school and would take her on these massive road trips, like down into Mexico and Guatemala. Cool. So she kind of already had it in her blood. And then my dad, he was raised in a very, very traditional kind of normal, quote unquote family. And travel was something that we kind of had to convince him to do over a longer period of time. Huh. But he was the one who actually came up with the dream of cycling the world. So the whole Let's Cycle Europe thing was more his idea. So they planned that for, I think it was like 2 or 3 years before we actually started. And we did a couple of trips. Where were we? It was so long ago. It's kind of hard to remember sometimes. Nova Scotia. We went up to Nova Scotia and we cycled around for a couple weeks just to make sure we weren't like gonna hate it.
Your training. You had to get in shape.
Yeah, it was our training. It was very useful.
And how old were your brothers at the time? You have 3 brothers, right?
Yeah. Oh, let's see. 9, 7, and 5.
So you are all good enough cyclists to take this on. That's like kind of amazing to me.
The littlest 2 were actually on trail bikes. So they hook onto the back of the parents' bicycle. So they could pedal and they could help, but they couldn't like take off into traffic on their own,
Cool, yeah.
So, but Gabe and I did it by ourselves.
Wow, that's amazing. And so from London, I mean, you don't just get off the plane and get on bikes, but eventually, this must have begun somewhere, and you did this. You rode your bikes through Europe. What was that like? That's something most people, 99.9% of people, never do that, and that's like by the age of 12, you had checked that box. That's pretty special.
It was. I think it's one of the biggest, gifts that my parents could have given me, because there's no way I could have done it otherwise, right? Without them deciding to make those sacrifices. So I'm really grateful for that. We did actually pretty much get off the plane and start cycling. I remember in London, which was our first day, right? And it being very overwhelming. My dad got lost, the GPS didn't work. It was crazy, but we pushed through and we kept going. And after that I would say the first month was pretty hard, but after that it was just like the best experience of my life. I wish I could do it again.
So you went from London, and you must have traveled maybe the English countryside, and then did you get on a ferry or something and go across to the mainland of Europe?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what exactly we did. We did get on a ferry, I think. Did we take the bus? No, we took the ferry for sure. And then I can't remember our exact itinerary. I'd have to look it up again. But we went through, Italy was really memorable. Germany was really memorable. Czech Republic was amazing. Just all over the place, really. Up until it started to get cold. So we went to Tunisia and we spent the winter there. Which is interesting.
And you guys were camping? Like, you were in tents entirely, or how were you guys living at that time?
Yeah, we were in tents. We carried all of our gear with us. So, we didn't have like a van carrying our stuff behind us. That would have been nice, I wish. But no, for the entire year we were camping. So my parents had a tent and I shared a tent with my 3 little brothers, which was exciting.
Yeah, I bet. Any kind of highlights, like any kind of amazing experiences that really stand out from that time?
From that time specifically, I mean, the adventure really continued after that. But I really enjoyed going to the Camel Festival in Duz. So that was in Tunisia, actually. But there's this festival that's held every single year, but it's not on like a Western time schedule, if you know what I mean. It's not actually annual. That's not the right word. You hear about it from the locals, and that's the only way you can figure out when and where it is. Oh, cool. So we just happened to hear about it, and we went, and it's this gathering of all of the Berber people and the Saharan nomads, and they get together to race camels and horses and sword fight, and that was amazing and really incredible experience.
And so you're saying that was more interesting than social studies at 10 a.m. in a classroom. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go along with that.
It was like something straight out of National Geographic. Like,
yeah, that's
it was
special.
amazing.
And you said, so the adventure continued from that trip. So tell us about, so you guys went home, right? You guys went home after this, like, but you guys, it sounds like you were changed. Something changed and it didn't work for you anymore to be home. Tell us what happened next.
Well, I mean, part of it was kind of forced, thanks to, the 2008 stock market crash. Like, I don't remember that at all, but my parents tell the story that we were in Italy, camping on this cliff. They woke up in the morning and all of their savings and all of their, investments were just gone. Like, wow. They had nothing. So at that point, it was kind of like, okay, well, either we go home and find a job, which, there's none available, or we reinvent ourselves. And they would tell that story better than I would. But basically, they found a way to make their income a little bit more flexible and online. So we did go home. My dad did work like a normal job for a few months, but we couldn't really get back into the whole staying in one place thing. It just wasn't really working for us anymore. Once you've had these experiences where every day you're meeting incredible new people and you're having adventures and you're really connecting as a family, it's kind of hard to go back to, dad working the 9 to 5 and just being in one spot all the time. So we ended up doing a bit of a road trip as kind of a way to get back into it. And we drove, I think it was 3 or 4 months down through Mexico and Guatemala, and Belize and the Honduras, and just kind of realized that we couldn't stop there.
And so you guys had some stuff in storage back in New Hampshire. Did you just kind of keep it there and decide to keep going, or did you take stuff with you, or how did things change from there?
Oh Lord, storage. We're still dealing with storage. Every time we go to New Hampshire, because we still have friends and family and, you know, people we care about there. So every time we go, we pay homage to the storage and we try to get rid of a little bit more every time. So it's narrowed down to a reasonable level at this point, but there's still like family keepsakes and stuff that you can't really get rid of. So most things have stayed in there. Now that my parents have a bit more of a home base in Canada, some of the things are kind of migrating, but we'll see.
You know, one thing that just dawned on me was remembering, you know, kind of my school years and how learning was so attached to results and tests and stress and I'm just wondering, through these experiences and traveling and just being in the middle of a wonderful festival like that in Northern Africa, rather than watching it, you know, on the TV in class, for example, like, did you notice how the experience of learning was so fun and joyful? Because I've come to that now. Like, it's very fun and joyful for me now, but it wasn't that way when I was in my early teens.
Yeah, I think I noticed it. I think mostly because I knew people who were in the school system, and they would always really complain about, you know, their exams or their schedules or whatever. And I had some schedule to some extent, and, you know, I did do exams to some extent, but most of my learning was the outside things, you know? And so when I was doing these outside things, I could kind of then take that interest and apply it to whatever bookish type things I was learning. Like, you know, economics suddenly applies to the real world in a way that, you know, it's kind of hard to see otherwise unless you're actually using it. Or history is a really good example. You know, if you're standing in the Colosseum, it suddenly becomes a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Or I think some of the most sobering and difficult moments of the travel experiences that I've had have been like, you know, visiting the concentration camps in Germany, or the killing fields in Cambodia, or like I've seen with my own eyes that genocide has happened on every continent. And that doesn't strike home as much unless you're actually standing there. Especially, I'd say, in Cambodia, where it was like 40 years ago, 50 years, like it was really recent. There are no grandparents in Cambodia. Nobody is old there. There's still people with legs and stuff missing from the mines. It just strikes home in a different way. It really becomes part of who you are and makes you passionate about these things in a way that I don't think I would have been if I just read about it.
Yeah, there is a certain, what you're making me realize is that the distancing effect that the traditional kind of schooling system instills, it's almost like it's not even real. It's like I'm just watching a movie here of something that may or may not have ever happened. Whereas if you're there, it's a wholly different experience and probably creates, you know, you tell me, but it probably creates a kind of a deeper urge to maybe serve or to do things differently once you've walked in those settings.
You care about politics a lot more and a lot differently. I feel like when you're raised the way that I have been, it becomes impossible to see the world from one perspective. You're constantly especially with American politics, I'm constantly kind of weighing the fact that, you know, it's not just America, it's the entire world is being affected by these things. And, you know, when you know those people, it's hard to villainize them. So Muslims, for example, like I have so many Muslim friends, or I'm trying to think what else. I don't know. It just becomes a lot more multifaceted. You realize that internationally, it's a lot more important to think about things internationally rather than with this sort of island mentality that people sometimes have if they haven't traveled that much. I don't know.
Yeah.
It can be achieved without travel to think that way, but it's definitely a lot easier if you're actually seeing things.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking about this notion in the abstract that people have of homeschooling or even world schooling, that's like you're isolated and alone and you don't connect with others, or you become like a social, you have no social connections. And what I'm hearing instead, and tell us more about this, is that this sense of connectedness that you actually have, literally that you meet people of all different kinds and all different places, but the sense that you seem to be sharing of like real connectedness with other people that, like Stephen was saying, could create a different kind of understanding and desire to serve.
Yeah, I mean, when you're constantly changing your community, there's no way to closet yourself and to hide from other perspectives or from people who might be wildly different than you are. So you have to kind of learn how to accept everybody in a way, even if you don't agree with them. And I think it's helped me learn how to communicate with people without trying to either, validate my own opinion or force my opinion on them. And it just exposes you to a lot more. I think world school kids probably get more socialization than you would if you were in a public school, just because you're constantly out interacting with the world and with people outside of your peer group or your cultural group or, whatever bubbles you happen to fit into. There is no bubble. You're in a giant bubble. So.
And so this is, you're, in terms of like catching up to your story, you were, you're 12, 13 and so talk about then how this became a lifestyle, like you're traveling and you're learning. And was there as we said before the call began, there's, world schooling, unschooling, homeschooling, these kind of broad blanket terms for learning basically when you're young. But there's probably millions of different ways that appears. And what was it like for you guys? Did you study things out of books? Did you read? Were there like, okay, let's read this together as a family, or was it wide open and you're just learning and traveling and moving and experiencing things?
I think it's probably different from everybody. Just going to put that disclaimer out there. Like, I don't think there's any one right way to do it. So I'm not going to say that mine is the right way. But my experience was that my family culture, including my grandparents and, extended family, is very much a culture of learning. They're really into discussions and, debates and what have you learned today? And, oh, have you read this book? So I feel like we were already kind of in that culture of learning outside the schoolroom even before we started traveling. But once we did, there was still structure. Like my mom is pretty strict on the idea of you definitely need to know math. You definitely need to know science. Like there are things that I'm going to make you learn because it's good for you. So, I did math all the way up through calculus. I did all the different kinds of, basic high school branches of science, and then some actually. So we did have structure, but the difference was that, we'd have our books, we'd have our materials, but we could also choose, okay, I want to learn extra about this thing, or I want to focus more on this subject this year. And we didn't have set school times. So my mom wasn't like, okay, from let's say 8 a.m. to noon, we're going to sit down and work. Right. Instead, we get a weekly schedule. This is what you need to learn this week. Oh, cool. And I'll check in with you on Friday. So my brother Gabe, he would do it all in the evening because he's an owl. I was the opposite. I would get up ridiculously early, like 4 a.m., and get all my school done by 7 or 8 in the morning. And I'd have the rest of the day to go learn about, things in the real world that I actually wanted to interact with. So it just kind of depended on the kid, I guess.
And
does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, that's pretty interesting that there would be a weekly structure, not a daily or hourly structure, and that there was a little bit of autonomy. I like that you're given a lot of time to do certain things, but do it on your own time. I think that helps foster a sense of confidence and self-esteem and
responsibility. Yeah.
And responsibility, yeah. And as you're talking too, I'm thinking like, you have three siblings, and I'm wondering, was that a help? Was that, I imagine that kind of creates this nice little pocket of you guys all kind of operating in the same conditions, if you will. Mm-hmm. Was that a help, or were you? I'm trying to kind of contrast that to say maybe an only child going through an experience like that.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean. School-wise, it would have been more of a help if I was the youngest, right? Like, hey, can you help me with this? Yeah. I ended up, helping my little brothers out a lot with whatever they were working on. But, it was also helpful because we would be learning about a lot of the same things at the same time. So clearly not math, but, in history, we'd be working on the same things. So we'd help each other. But on more of a social level, I really was glad. Most of the time, everybody fights. But I was glad to have my three brothers with me. It's like, you have your little group of besties wherever you go. And because we were with each other all day, every day, we really had to learn to become best friends. Like, we couldn't really be like assholes to each other and survive. Like, survival tactic, be nicer. So.
Yeah, one thing we learned on our van trip, and that we've learned from people who live in tiny houses is that when conflict comes up, you there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to go. There's not like an attic or a basement, or in our case, we couldn't get in the car and take a drive. I mean, we lived out of our car, so there is. It does kind of foster this skill of letting go. That's something that we've learned.
Yeah, definitely. And also just being more loving, I think, and being
don't
being
be a
more
jerk
intimate.
to start with.
Yeah. Don't and no, really, it's transformative. We've only been living in this lifestyle for 3 months, and it's not like we lived in an enormous house before where we, we were in a 900 square foot condo, but we could escape, quote unquote, with cars or whatever, and it's completely different when you're such a unit. And interdependent like that you learn to be a different kind of person.
Yeah, I definitely agree, especially because I feel like when you're in your own home and, you're doing things within your community, you tend to each have kind of your own thing going on, your own life. When you're all traveling together, you're all tackling the same problems as a unit. My dad used to say, we need to be working like a well-oiled machine. Like, are you doing your job? Are you helping your friend do his job? And that whole idea of, okay, we need to work together. We need to love each other. We need to be kind. I'm not going to say that it worked perfectly. We weren't always loving or kind.
Sure.
But it did help to foster this idea of, okay, these kids that I'm living with are my best friends and my partners in what I'm doing. They're not competition. So I think that was valuable for me.
That's interesting, yeah, because it's something that is fostered in the traditional schooling system that certainly I experienced is a sense of competition. You're vying for all kinds of things, attention from the teacher to
grades,
scholarships, grades, valedictorian, you name it. There is a very, very strong current of competition in the traditional schooling system, and being separated from that, not having that experience, I imagine there's a big upside where that notion of learning is divorced from it being in relationship to someone else's learning or somebody else's process.
Interesting. Well, I don't know. I'm extremely competitive still, but maybe not comparing myself against others. I don't know.
Yeah. There are a few other questions I want to ask, but we definitely want to get into hearing a little bit more about the travel, because I know people thinking about, how old are you now, Hannah? Are you 19 now? Is that right?
I'm 21.
21. Okay.
Yeah.
So in this time that you traveled with your family, you traveled, I think, to over 26 countries across 6 different continents. Can you tell us about, just in a broad brush, I guess, kind of like where you went and maybe some of your favorite places and highlights from your travels?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, Yeah, we went to all 6 continents, but I mean, I've really only been to Peru and South America, so I'm not really sure if that counts, but, well, let's see. We spent a lot of time in Central America. That was probably where we spent the most time. And so I feel like Guatemala is kind of a second home to me at this point. That's somewhere that we've become really connected to. I don't know. I'm having a hard time answering this one. When it's all spread out like that, it's kind of like, oh, where did you go with the last 10 years of your life?
Sure.
Well, but
I don't know. Okay,
it wasn't like you guys were moving week to week. There was you would find something and stay there a while. Maybe let's kind of cover that too, because I imagine as a dad and as a dude, I'm sitting here thinking, how did this work? What's the format? How did you structure? What's the itinerary? I'm getting very logical. So maybe you can help me understand kind of what that was like. Would you be someplace for a month or longer? Were there any kind of longer stays within these years that really stand out?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the longest we would ever stay in a place is about 6 months, usually for visa reasons. It's kind of hard to find somewhere you can stay for longer than 6 months. Often we would stay kind of in one home base area. So, for example, in Thailand, we had a home base, and from there we would travel to Vietnam or Cambodia or all over the place.
Where was your home base in Thailand?
It was on Phuket.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Beautiful. So, but like the quiet side of the island.
Yeah.
Right. There's definitely a few aspects to Phuket.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So that allows you to kind of have a sense of home, and you can find a schedule and a bit of a routine there if you want to, while still taking 2-week, 3-week trips outside of that place and getting to see the surrounding countryside of it. So we did that a lot. And the same in Guatemala. We would spend like 6 months there and then occasionally do trips outside. I guess we're kind of fans of going deep, not wide. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Yeah, where you really invest time in one area and get to know the community and like connect with the local culture. Because you can learn a lot more than you can just by hitting all the tourist hotspots. Yeah. So we did that a lot for sure.
Did you guys ever go to Koh Mook?
Koh Mook? No, we did not.
Just south of Phuket. So it was our favorite stop in Thailand because it wasn't so overrun with backpackers and partiers and things like that, which is pretty common there. By the way, how many languages do you speak or do you feel at least somewhat proficient in?
I'm totally fluent in Spanish, and then I just speak little bits and niblets of like multiple different languages. I pick up things, but not languages. Yeah,
I bet traveling like that, particularly when you're younger, you are able to take on a language when you get somewhere far quicker than, say, someone who doesn't have that experience, helping you kind of integrate fairly quickly.
What's interesting is that I can understand other languages very easily, but I can't, like, you don't actually, know all the words and the grammatical rules and stuff to actually speak it. But if someone speaks French to me, or even I'm learning that I can understand Dutch pretty well, even though I have no idea how to speak it. So that's kind of interesting. That is interesting. I was just thinking about that yesterday.
Yeah. I imagine when you're exposed to language so young, there's commonalities and literal commonalities in the way that languages work, but also in the way that people communicate, or something that you would maybe notice by exposure to so many people that you wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. Body language especially.
So, you have this powerful experience, and you're currently in university. And so what was the talk like as you kind of maybe got to 16, 17, 18 about what was next? Were you encouraged to go to school? Was that something you really wanted? You wanted that kind of experience? Tell us about how that came about for you.
Okay, well, I'm the oldest, so I'm the guinea pig.
Right.
At about, I think it was 15 or 16. We were in New Zealand at the time when my parents started being like, okay, what are you going to do now? Because I finished all of the high school work that they could really throw at me at about 15 or 16. I just go through things really quickly. So they were kind of saying that if I was going to go to university, I should start working out towards that. Or if I was going to start a business or whatever I wanted to do, really, I should start doing it because I had all this free time. So I thought about that for a while and decided I did want to go to university. I was definitely encouraged to go. Mm-hmm. Is it disconnecting?
We got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, because I didn't have a specific high school diploma, I decided to take some e-distance courses through Oregon State University that were not applied towards a degree, but just to kind of prove that I could do it, Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So I got those credits, which allowed me to kind of bypass the whole APA, the tests that you're supposed to take. So that took about 2 years. I just kind of did that until I was ready to go. And then I just transferred straight into Queen's University without any problem because my grades were good enough.
Queen's is a big time school. That's I think there's some that's a very prestigious university up in Canada.
It's not to brag. It's kind of like the Oxford of Canada.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. But I went in person and I brought my list of, okay, this is what I've been doing the last few years. I'd done some fundraising. I'd done some passion projects, things that I was really interested in. And then also I had 5 or 6 courses completed through Oregon State and I had A's in all of them except one. So they just accepted me kind of on the spot. So it wasn't difficult, which is nice.
Yeah. And what's that experience like for you, being at university and being in one place? How has that transition been for you and how do you like it?
After about the first 6 months, I had the most insane cabin fever I have ever experienced in my life. And I wanted to get out so badly. And then after the 9th month, I kind of went into nesting mode. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of nice. I have people in it. Well, I have people everywhere. But, when you start to really get even deeper into a community, I don't know, it's just a different experience. Mm-hmm. It was interesting. Some funny parts of it were buying toilet paper. Totally forgot that adults have to do that.
There we go.
I ran out a few times. I'm not going to lie.
It's hilarious.
I think that's normal experiences.
Yeah.
And I know you said you were working on some passion projects. Definitely want to ask about that. I know you said that your parents said, okay, you finished up all the high school stuff. You could start a business or go to college. You did both, right? I mean,
did.
You've been inspired to create your own businesses from your parents' own entrepreneurial experiences. Tell us about some of the businesses you've created and passion projects you have.
Okay, well, I guess I was just inspired to be kind of able to have the freedom to do what I wanted when I wanted and not to be tied into a job. I've met so many digital nomads doing this life mm-hmm. who escaped, in their 30s or 40s that I didn't want to have to escape in my 30s or 40s.
Yeah. You're talking to a couple of escapees.
Yep,
that's definitely us. Broke out, but we support your aim, no doubt.
I just didn't want to get stuck in the first place.
Sure.
So I started. What was the first thing I did? I wrote a book. I ghost wrote. I think it was a series of 4 books about It was called Artsy Girls, and please don't look them up. It's terrible. It's very embarrassing. But that was my first project. And then I started, I taught myself how to design and build websites. Mm-hmm. I taught myself SEO, social media management, a little bit of PPC stuff. Just anything that I picked up that I thought was interesting, I just taught myself how to do and found somebody who would pay me for it. Mm-hmm. right now I teach creative writing to kids via Skype, which is so much fun. And I manage some social media. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment.
And you're quite an artist. I mean, before we talked, you were showing us a little bit of your environment there. There's some pretty cool stuff. I mean, is that just a not a hobby, but a love? I mean, I think art is something you love to do if you're doing it. Yeah.
That's not something I get paid for.
Yeah.
I wish. That'd be cool. No, I do art because I feel like no matter where you are in the world, if you hang up your art, it instantly feels like home, you know? Mm. And I play a lot of music. I play a few instruments. So those are my big time wasters, I guess.
And so your website is edventuregirl.com, but it's EDVE, and we'll link to that in the show notes, but edventuregirl.com. And so talk to us a little bit about that endeavor and sort of what your aim is with that, because that's kind of how we found you. And I think, you know, the content of this interview directly relates to what you write about there. So what is your aim? What are you trying to promote through your writings and that presence?
Good question. I'm going to be honest. I'm not really trying to promote anything. Edventure Girl was something I started, I think I was 14, just as a way to write about what I was doing and connect with my friends and family and people that I met all over the world. Mm-hmm. So they could, you know, interact with me there and see what I'd been up to. So I didn't have to, you know, send out an email to 200 friends around the world every day. So that's why I started it. And then from that, it just kind of grew. It's not really something I put a lot of work into. It's more a personal project, I guess. Mm-hmm. It went viral when I posted that world schooling, how it ruined my childhood thing. And then it started to take off. I really should do something to make it.
We will link to that. We'll link to that article in our show notes, by the way, because I love that post.
Yeah. I
got so much hate mail though. People are like, "Oh my God, you're such a snob." Like, I know, right?
Talk a minute about that, just for folks who haven't read it yet. How did world schooling ruin your childhood?
Oh, it was just stuff like, you know, I only have one pair of shoes. Oh my God. Or like, what was some of the other things? I haven't read it in forever. That I have friends all over the world, and I need to read it again. It's been so long.
I remember you mentioning about being a snob about a bunch of things because you've seen opera in the most amazing opera houses.
Right,
yes.
Right. Like that.
My culture is even worse. I swear to God. We were in some gorgeous chapel somewhere. I think it was in Mexico maybe. And he looks up, I think he was 8 at the time, and he goes, it's not the Sistine Chapel. And I was like, dude, come on. But yeah, definitely a snob about some things.
You know, I'm trying to sort of there's so many. It's funny, like as you're talking, you're indicating all these subtle ways that I think you've fostered a kind of natural curiosity and a relationship to learning that is uncommon, at least in the traditional sense. Passion projects, having all these different things that you taught yourself, being able to pick up on languages. And it's really like, you know, that long experience of travel and learning and being in a tight nucleus of a family. It's not like you're, quote unquote, a superhero, but you do have a different relationship to things than many people, I think, your age, or even, certainly people who come through the traditional schooling system. And one question that I definitely want to cover or ask you is, you've met a lot of people in your travels. You've made a lot of friends, maybe during some of these longer stays in Guatemala, Thailand, et cetera. Do you keep in touch with them? And what is the ongoing nature of those connections like?
Well, I have a couple of responses to that. First, can I get to the question after I respond to the...
Yeah, sure.
Okay. First, like, I feel like travel was a gift to me. It's like something that just happened to me thanks to my parents, and I really value it. And I think it has been super influential in shaping who I was or who I am now. But I also would say that a lot of the things that that people find interesting about me can also be achieved at home. Like, it's not necessarily something that's like, okay, she traveled, pow, magically she can, teach herself and enjoy learning and stuff. I feel like these are things that you can foster in home wherever you are, because I'm trying to think about how to put it. Travel's a tool that helps you to see the world differently, but it's not the end all be all. It's not the only thing. You can also travel and not have experiences that allow you to see the world differently. Right. So,
yeah.
And as far as friends, yeah, I definitely do talk to them and hang out with them and see them all the time. Skype is amazing. When I was 11, it was a lot harder because I had email and that was it. But even then, my boyfriend / partner of 4 years, I met him in Germany when I was 12. And, we stayed besties over email and then, saw each other more. And so obviously the people that I meet still become a part of my life later on.
I am curious, something that we talk a lot about on the podcast is following your excitement or, your natural bliss, your natural joy. And I'm curious about, it sounds like your family did a lot of that and that was instilled in you. I'm curious if is that something that you would say that you do? I know you said on your website that you hope to travel again when you finish university, for example. Like, do you think that's something that comes naturally to you? Is that something that you do, follow your excitement? And how does that work in your life?
I definitely do follow my excitement. I mean, you can probably even hear that I'm a very excitable person. I talk ridiculously fast. But the way that I tend to do it is by actually planning out, okay, this is what I'm going to do next. This is what I'm going to do next. Because otherwise, I do have a tendency to kind of hobbit down and not do anything. I have a list on my wall right now that's like, okay, adventure list. What can I do on a weekend where I have nothing to do? So I'd say that's one way that I follow my excitement. I feel like another way is just continually bolstering that feeling of, wow, there's so much to be excited about in the world. Meeting other people and talking to them is a great way to find new things to be excited about. Or TED Talks. I watch so many TED Talks. It's almost embarrassing. Because it's a great way to, learn something that you can't learn without somebody else being like, hey, did you know about this? So I'd say that's how I do it.
And so you mentioned your adventure list. What's on the list right now?
Oh, hold on. Let me get it.
I love it.
Okay. I want to see the Black Forest. I want to go to St. Paddy's in Dublin, which I'm already planning, which should be really fun. Go to Delft. It's mostly like places I want to go, but also stuff that's silly, like eat a Dutch apple pie. Actually, there's a lot of food things. Eat Belgian waffles.
Ooh, sounds good.
So just little things that you could do in a day or things that are a bit bigger.
Yeah.
And in all of this, is there a spiritual belief or set of beliefs that underlies the way you live your life? Is that a part of your life?
I feel like that's something I'm currently greatly debating, and I struggle with a lot, actually. I was initially, like when I was 11 and younger, in a very conservative Christian background. And then as we were traveling, it's kind of hard to keep, like, when you're in one community and everyone around you believes the same thing, especially as a kid, it's really easy to be like, oh, well, that, it's just true. You don't even question it, right? But when you're then traveling and you're like seeing Buddhism and Islamic beliefs and all these different ideas and people who have different ideas and are willing to talk about them, it gets a little difficult to be like, okay, this is the one truth in the world and everyone else is wrong. So I don't have an answer to that. I'm still thinking about that.
Well, but being open and searching for answers or even information or just being open is I think kind of 90% of it, honestly.
Yeah. Seeing what resonates with you.
I remember when I was 16, I think and this was back in the late 80s, but we traveled to Russia. And I remember being taken on this, and I grew up in the mountains in North Carolina. It was very conservative, very kind of Bible Belt Baptist. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so that was kind of my background. And we went to Russia, and we went to this church. And the amount of devotion present in that church was so overwhelming. I thought it just sort of blew away all the fences I had around what I thought belief looked like, what I thought spirituality, what I thought at that time religion even looked like. I was like, wait a second. Mm. This is amazing. People do it very, very differently, and yet it feels as strong or even stronger than what I experience at home. Again, another kind of amazing benefit to travel and seeing how other people live is that, many of the ways that we divide ourselves in this world, whether it's cultural or religion or politics, as you mentioned, they kind of ease off because you see behind that there are real people there doing things. You connect with those people, and there's a humanity to it. Yet another, I think, huge benefit to travel and seeing the world is that fundamental building block for living life is put in place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still have a lot of thinking to do about that because on the one hand, I see a lot of the positive impacts of, spirituality, and that people's beliefs really, really drive them to do good things in the world. But at the same time, I see a lot of terrible things that have been created by religion and spirituality as well. And so it's something that I am really on the fence about, I think, at the moment. But we'll see. I'm just trying to stay open about it and learning.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. Well, so I guess we should start to wrap up here because we're almost out of time. We have a usual set of 3 questions that we ask all of our guests, just to kind of create some consistency across all these very, very different conversations. And so we'll get started with those. You want to go first, Teresa?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, what book or books up to 3 would you recommend that every human being should read?
Oh my gosh.
And we know you like books, so I know this is
tough.
tough.
Question.
I like books, but also I read very ridiculous books. The one book that I carry with me everywhere is The Princess Bride. And I know that has nothing to do with reality.
Wow, cool.
Everyone should read it. Honestly, that's a really tough question for me. I have no idea. The Princess Bride is good.
Favorite authors, maybe? Any authors that you particularly like?
Neil Gaiman. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, cool.
So most of the books that I like are like weird, twisted looks at the world and the way that people live in it. So it's not usually anything that I can really point to and be like, this book is a great book that everyone should read. And also I read stuff like Space Odyssey and
some science fiction. Awesome.
Yeah, so I can't really point to anything that I'll be like, okay, this is inspiring. You should read it if you want to go out and change the world, because my tastes are a bit odd at the moment.
But I think we all have to read those books you ghost wrote. Those definitely.
Please no.
Just teasing. Second question, and this is always a fun one for people who have done a lot of traveling. But what thing, item, or keepsake have you held on to the longest, and why?
My fiddle. I've had my fiddle since I was 10 or 11, so for the entire trip, pretty much.
Wow.
Cool. And you call it a fiddle and not a violin. What's the difference?
It's debated heavily. Well, My actual fiddle is not technically a fiddle. I call it that, but it's some weird crossover between a viola and a violin. It's odd. It doesn't actually make sense. We found it at a music store, and the guy was like, "Are you sure you want this? It's some weird crossover between a viola and a violin." We're like, "Yeah, I mean, why not? It sounds great." So there is a difference. It usually has to do with sanding the bridge down. So that you can play a lot faster. If the strings are closer to the actual neck of the violin, you can move your fingers more quickly and, fiddle.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. The last question is, what are you most excited about right now?
Christmas. God. Oh my God. I have always wanted to see Christmas in Germany. For some reason, we missed it last time because we were in Tunisia. And the Christmas markets, I've been inspired by them since I was a little kid. So it's like I'm 10 again. I'm so excited to see the Christmas markets. I can't handle it.
I can remember I was in Germany and France and like a few winters a long time ago and just being mesmerized by how they do Christmas there. It's really...
What's it like?
Well, oftentimes you're in older cities or older towns, and there's often a center of that town which is not really about cars. It's more pedestrian.
Yeah.
And there's trees and there's lights and there's wonderful little kind of outdoor markets, as you say. And there's music and it's amazing. It's really amazing. And there are no cars. So you can wander and just stroll, and they're really set up to greet people who are on foot. And it's magical, as you say. I can remember that so fondly. I worked for a dance company 20 years ago, and we spent a lot of time in Europe, and during the late fall was a popular time for American companies to tour in these areas. And I can remember being in all through France and Western Germany and just being blown away by the presence of Christmas in those places. Now you've got me really fired up, Hannah.
Let's go.
Yeah. Hey.
It sounds great. Well, one last question that just occurred to me, and I think for when I was 21, I was thinking about, all right, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Like, what am I going to be when I grow up? I've got to get a job, and all of this, and it was like I was looking at a straight line in front of me. Now I've been very blessed that straight line has kind of just disintegrated, and it's this huge open playing field that I feel I'm on. But I'm wondering, what do you feel like you're looking on the horizon of your life, maybe past school? What does it look like?
I feel kind of sad for 20-year-old you now.
Don't worry. A few years after that, he was wandering around France and Germany. Things changed quickly.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, I mean, I've already kind of got basic, income figured out, so I don't really feel that pressure to, get a real job. It's funny, I would really love to try the van life after school and see,
nice.
What that's like. I love road tripping, and I love living in small spaces, and I love not paying rent, so right. I think it would be cool. I kind of see myself jumping from endeavor to endeavor to endeavor to endeavor as long as I live, because I tend to get really passionate about something new all the time and want to learn everything about it and try it and focus on it for a while. And then, once I've learned it and had some experience with it, I'm like, okay, what's next? What can I learn about next? I feel like specialization is overrated, and putting 40, maybe not 40 years, but a lifetime into one area of work is kind of selling yourself short. If we live in this big world full of all these fascinating people and things and ideas and things that you can do with your time, I would just love to try as much of it as possible.
That's awesome.
Quite a great note
That's
to end
awesome. Well, cool. It's so inspiring, Hannah. Tell us, for our listeners, where people can connect with you online and anything you'd like people to know about what's coming up for you.
Okay. Well, there's my blog, obviously, adventuregirl.com. And then you can also follow me on Facebook under the same name. That's pretty much where everyone can follow me. Things I have coming up for me. I'm here in Europe until August. So I'll be studying at the University of Groningen until I get done there. And then I'll just be traveling. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. We'll see. And then back to Queens for at least 1 year before I finish my degree.
And that'll be in the wintertime or next fall?
Next fall.
Cool.
So I'll be going back like August, late August, September.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, Hannah, this has been a delight. It's been, as I mentioned to you before the call, we're talking to you both as like interviewers, but also as parents of a very young, an 18-month-old at this point. But it's very exciting and inspiring to hear of your experiences, and mostly just to kind of witness your maturity and your outlook is very inspiring to think that we could offer that. As you said, travel was a gift that your parents gave to you. We feel the same way, and it's clear that the gift has flourished in your life, and we're grateful to you for giving us this time.
Well, thank you, of course. And, thanks for putting together such great interview questions. I tend to kind of get the same three, and you guys really spiced it up. It was totally different.
Awesome.
Oh, cool. Great to hear.
Thank you.
You never know.
Great. All right, that's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this awesome interview with Hannah Miller. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything we mentioned, including Hannah's site and for sure her article on world schooling that we referenced during the interview, her Facebook profile, plus links to the books we discussed. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Edventure Girl. That's ownstream.co/EDVENTUREGIRL.
Also, please sign up for our weekly tip-off email at ownstream.co and just click the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we share each Monday 3 cool things we've learned in the last week in the areas of lifestyle, business, and spirit. This could be an amazing quote, individual, tip, or tool designed to bring you more freedom and power in your life. So definitely sign up for that again at ownstream.co and just click sign up.
Finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. We really need your help in expanding our reach, helping us to inspire more people and spread the amazing ideas discussed on this episode with Hannah Miller and others too. If it feels right to you, just go to iTunes, search for Ownstream Podcast, click ratings and reviews, then click that 5th star, hopefully, and leave us a brief comment on how this episode has helped inspire you. Thank you so much for considering that. We are truly grateful. Also, we're on Twitter at Ownstream and on Instagram where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Ownstream Podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.